when Sheena and I were married, as we were making our promises to each other, one of our songs was Standing on the Promises of God. And Christian couples need to understand the strength of the promises of God in living a lifetime of love. Because marriage is in trouble in many places. Or to use a phrase from one of the books, marriage is on the rocks. Instead of being on the rock, marriage is on the rocks. And one of the ways we find that out is in the jokes that people share. And these 3 jokes I'm about to share were being shared at a wedding reception, if you can catch it. At a wedding. Some of you are already laughing, so I don't even need to say I found out how to be happy in marriage when I got married, but then how to be happy in life when I got married. But then it was too late. Took the wrong turn. Marriage reminds me of a cafeteria. The lady looks to her saying, you take what looks good for you now and you pay for it later. And then the man among them says, I like to watch my wedding video backward. So I can see myself walk out of the church a free man. Dream on, dream on. But look, the statistics back up those comments about marriage. In 2000, there were nearly 1.8 million divorces filed by Canadians. Last year, the last stats that we have, the most recent ones we have, 2.7 plus. When you consider that the total married population is just under 15 million married people in Canada, almost 3 million is a very high rate of divorce. The good news here is that half of Canada's population are married. There was a time not too long ago when there was concern, will people ever get married in the future? Well, half of Canada's population are married, so that's a good news story. But there's work we have to do to help one another. And this began for me in my first year as a minister in 1990. 2 couples in the church broke up out of the blues. One broke up permanently, one was broken up for 3 years, and then they came back together. But the surprise for me was, what happened? And that's because we are not aware of how much pressure people carry in relationships. If they are not filing for divorce, many are living in a state that psychologists call codependency. It's a dangerous state with feelings of I can't live with him or I can't live with her, but I can't live without her either. And this is the same person who drives you crazy, but you still want to be with them. And it's not uncommon in these types of codependency. They are often the places where those violent acts of love or passion tend to emerge. And so there's some real work to do so that we can strengthen one another. The picture should get better, can get better. And when we look at the Bible's declaration that he who finds a wife finds a good thing, we should get a sense of this is supposed to be better than it looks and feels for a lot of people. He who finds a wife finds a good thing and receives favor from the Lord. Some men disagree with this declaration because this gentleman says, I haven't spoken to my wife for 18 months because I don't like to interrupt her. The other one says, I married Miss Right. I just didn't know her first name was always. Similarly, some women also think men are just goofers with jokes like this one. What do you call a man with half a brain? The women say gifted. We're taking it on the chin, guys. Okay. The Bible clearly has other ideas. We're going to read from Ephesians chapter 5. Ed, you always have a strong voice, so you can read for me.
Sure. Submit to one another out of the reverence of Christ. Wives, submit yourself to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in
And Janice, you're just as good. Here's your passage.
Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In this way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself.
And Scott, though you're far away, we can still hear you. Here's the last section.
After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body, just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. However, each of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband.
Look at the intensity of love described in these passages. For one another, the husband for the wife for the husband, that men ought to love their wives the way that Christ loves the church. And he loved the church so much, he went all the way to the cross. He was willing to die. He did not stop at anything to express his love for his church. And that the kind of love men ought to have for their wives is that sort of love. And the picture of the husband and wife is used to mirror the love of Christ and his church. Just so profound, as Paul puts it, this is a profound mystery. But it's also profound for couples to understand that the way that we relate to each other is used as a picture of how God relates to the church. It's profound for us and should give us a reverence for the institution that I know is missing in the world, because this matters to God, this matters to Christ, and we ought to love one another the way that God loves us. Here are 4 challenges we face when we come into a relationship. There is the challenge of unmet needs and unrealistic expectations. There is the issue of conflict resolution, negative communication, and the lack of positive behavioral reciprocity. A big phrase there that essentially is talking about how we do one good turn for each other. One good turn deserves another. Children, if I can get you, I've got a story for you. What do you think? You want the story? All right, okay. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is.
Would take them a little bit. This is I had their and love being that there's other Mom. My head. How did just if you finger top but it was for that number I was your an older almost every day and
Let's try and pack a little bit some of those challenges we saw earlier in the list there. Most of us know that we need physical needs met, like food, rest, air, and freedom from pain. There are also psychological needs for love, security, contact with others, and they are quite normal. Sometimes we also have individuals who have unique personal needs, like the need to dominate, to control, to possess, to achieve, and to help or rescue others. And this particular personality trait has the tendency to want to be the center of attention or the star of the show. And this can present some challenges in a relationship because the relationship is designed for give and take. But if you are that kind of dominant person who has to have your way, you may want everything to come your way. And Norman Wright, one of my favorite authors, he wrote the book Always Daddy's Girl, and because I have 4 girls, it's a book that is special to me. And I'm going to tell you this story about being the father of 4 girls. One day, my second-born daughter, Mercy, the mother of our grandchildren, came back from a junior high school class on human reproduction with a big announcement. She said, "Daddy, I found out it's your fault that we are all girls." I told the story at church and they laughed forever. And at the end they said, "Yeah, you got told, you got told." No spouse, anywhere, he writes, has the ability to meet all the needs of the other spouse. And it's therefore dangerous to come into marriage thinking that all of a sudden, all my issues are going to be resolved, all my needs are going to be met, I am going to be the happiest person because I have come into a marriage relationship. He argues that it's critical to carry your own sense of fulfillment into your relationship. That it's critical to be able to continue to feed that sense of fulfillment. And it can be done in a variety of ways, sometimes through your contact with friends. You go and get energized. Those of us who play sports, if I play sports and I have had a good game, I'm doing well, I go home, I'm excited, the children want to hear, my wife wants to hear, etc. Something that energizes you, gives you strength to invest in the other person. If that doesn't exist, we can end up with what he calls the leech effect. And I don't know if you've ever had a leech latch onto your hand. They can be nasty. And they picture a negative relationship quite well. Marriage does enhance life and should enhance it to a very high extent, but it is not a cure for all ills. Here's an example. An individual comes into a marriage relationship and they are prone to sadness and loneliness. And in their minds they think, once I get married, my sadness will disappear, my loneliness will be a thing of the past. And then they get married and that still continues. The easy conclusion to make is that this is happening because this is the wrong spouse. If I had the right one, I would not be feeling the same way I used to feel before I got married. So, they conclude it's the wrong person and the search begins for the next Mr. Right or Mrs. Right. No, if that's the case, don't rush to that conclusion, don't rush to jump out. It just means there is some work to do. That work begins with what I call a better view of marriage. Towards the end, we are going to hear a prayer that a man called Peter Marshall, a great pastor of Scottish origin, who once was chaplain of the United States Senate. This is a prayer that he used to offer. And an excerpt of it says, "We clasp our hands, we blend our lives, and we unite our hearts for the walk of life." We clasp our hands, blend our lives, and unite our hearts for the walk of life. And this It requires us to bring the strengths of our upbringing, our education, our achievements, our friendship, whatever it is that puts energy into our lives. Because if we try and do this with an empty offering plate, that won't work very well. Often the best relationship is where you bring your joys, I bring my joys, your spouse brings her joys, his joys, and you build on them with a collective achievement. And that reduces the impact of personal deficiencies and enhance our chances of real joy and happiness as a couple. Wonderful. Important that we continue to teach our children love. The first place where children learn to see love is in the home. What they see practiced at home becomes embedded in their lives as an experience of love or lack of it. The second challenge that couples face in growing together is that of poor conflict resolution. A marriage brings two different people together, and so often when we are looking at couples, prospective couples, we think about the compatibility factor. Are they really compatible? And even if they are still going to have issues of differences of opinion and need good conflict resolution. And conversely, even if they are not compatible, that doesn't mean they can't make it in a relationship. Compatibility is often overworked. You can have opposites who have a great relationship. You can have people with more similarities who have a very poor relationship. But to make it, inevitably you need some strong conflict resolution skills. Here's a list of some of the keys to that process. Number one, when an issue arises, stay focused. The temptation is to build on that because it's the same thing you did last month or last week or last year. Stay focused, deal with that one problem. Listen carefully to your spouse. The truth is often a part of what you have to say and what your spouse has to say. So listen carefully so you can see the other's point of view. Respond to criticism with understanding and empathy. We all get defensive most of the time when we get criticism, and we need to be able to hear and understand what's being said. And then own your mess. Sometimes, you might have blown something. Own it. If you've blown it, own it. And allow that process of saying, I'm sorry, I blew it. Avoid those you did these messages and use more I messages. I feel or I find that when a situation like this happens, it doesn't work very well for me. And it doesn't quite sound the same way as saying, when you did that, I didn't like it. Look for compromise. In problem solving, there is always a give and take. In the first problem there of unmet needs and expectations, there's an inadequate understanding of the give and take factor, the compromise solution. And if you can't solve the problem, take time out. Wait, what looks like a crisis today is often not a crisis tomorrow. Ever found out that? Today it's a crisis. You wait one day and tomorrow it's quite a simple problem. And I visited a family one day when they were in a state of conflict and it was very heightened. And there was not much I could do. So in the end I just said, okay, I'll call him Rick. Rick, I need something from you. I need you to declare a ceasefire today. Withdraw from this today. Let's go at it again tomorrow. When I called after I returned to work, he said everything was fine. So I said, okay, so what did you do? He says, I didn't do anything. I just came back home and everything was fine. And all I did the day before was, we're not getting anywhere. I just need you to get out of this. Withdraw from the argument. Withdraw from the crisis. Let's go back at it tomorrow. So it may be bad today. It doesn't mean it will be bad tomorrow. But sometimes we think it's bad today, so if I don't get him sorted out, if I don't get her sorted out, this could be the end. Not necessary. So taking time out is always helpful. The third one is negative communication. It's not surprise that where there is poor conflict resolution, there likely will be negative communication. Due to the many issues that we've highlighted already and many more, it's easier for couples to spew out bad words about each other than positive things. It's easy to criticize, it's easy to tease, it's easy to pop out those cold, harsh words. Rather than commend each other, because positive communication boosts a relationship. It also boosts the individual self-esteem. If you keep commending your spouse, they're going to start to feel better about many more things than just that one thing you commended them about. One of the most interesting things about communication is that it has greater capacity to contribute to a couple chemistry than any other factor. It's not as well understood in that sense, but in fact, it has a greater ability to contribute to the couple chemistry, and then the sky is the limit if we get that under control. The last one is what's called a lack of positive behavioral reciprocity. A long way of saying a relationship needs a give and take capacity. You can't always have your way, I can't always have my way. And if any of us are trying to always have our way like those dominant people we talked about in earlier slides, that's a recipe for enhanced conflict and poorer experience rather than resolution. Spouses need to learn to do good for each other. One good turn deserves another. The challenge is this: when couples are not feeling good about each other, there is no desire to do good things for each other. And so it makes the picture worse. So when you arrive in a counselor's office, you might be asked, oh, so what's the problem? And usually, most of us, when there's a problem, we have no list. No trouble filling a list. We can fill a page easily with things that are not going right. But if you flip the idea and say, okay, tell me what's going well, we've seen a lot of couples scratch their heads trying to find the good things. But it's part of the drill, so we make them find those good things, and then here is the experiment. Okay, so if you were feeling good, you're going to bring a flower, you're going to take her out, you're going to do this. All right, this whole week, that's the homework. You're going to do the good things for each other. And then when you come back, we'll talk about it. It's almost a foolproof formula. If you start to practice love like that, the 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, love is kind, love is good, it's not jealous, it's not boastful, and you do good things for your spouse, inevitably, they'll start to feeling better. They'll start to feel better. And you will start to feel better. So before too long, both of you are in a better place than you were last week. Gary Smelly has written that excellent book on the 5 languages of love. They've become so popular, very worldwide. Summarize them in 5 ways to express love. Number 1, words of affirmation. Like, can anybody think of an example? How do we express words of affirmation to one another?
You did a great job.
You did a great job. And if it's Ed speaking, what would you say to Janice, Ed?
You're the best.
You're the best. All right, there. Those are important words. I love you is a big, big phrase. And one of the challenges in couples is that we don't say it enough. When one wife dragged her husband to a counselor and the counselor said, so how can I help you? She said, my husband just never tells me that he loves me. The counselor says, is that true, sir? He said, yes. When I married her, I told her I love you. And I said, if anything changes, I'll let you know. So apparently nothing had changed, but she didn't know. He wasn't telling her. Use them often. Acts of service. Those things that the other person appreciates because you did them. In the house, they could be vacuuming, they could be washing dishes, or making beds, whatever it is that the other will appreciate, or cleaning up the yard, something that is important. Gifts are self-explanatory. Quality time. I know a close friend of mine who is a busy guy, and his wife is quite busy too. Her language of love is time. If he gives me time, then I'm fine. Then I know he is with me. Then I know he is mine. And then, of course, there is the physical touch. It's so important to understand what language your spouse needs love expressed. Because if you don't understand, you can be doing things of love, but they don't come through as love because they are not your spouse's language of love. In a marriage enrichment seminar where we were being trained to be counselors, the trainer who works for Alliance fixes telephone poles and lines all over the place. And he has this habit of picking up flowers of different kinds in the bush and taking them to his wife. So he uses that example in the training as, that's a language of love, because he knew that his wife loves flowers. While he's saying that, this woman over here bursts into tears. And so he stops and says, "What is it, Pam?" Her name wasn't Pam, but I used Pam. I forgot I had a Pam in the earlier service. And I'm still stuck on Pam. So what is it, Pam? And she said, "My father always brought flowers for my mother. So I understood love to be expressed in flowers. My husband has never brought me any flowers." And here's this guy talking about flowers. So the husband looked at him and said, "Bob, you have put me in a lot of trouble now." But the key was this. I hope he learned something there. That was an important language for his wife. And we all have to learn that. Wife and husband together, so that we can share love in a way that it is appreciated. So is marriage an endangered species? Well, the good news from those stats we looked at, with nearly half of Canadians still living in married relationships, it clearly is not an endangered species. Once upon a time, those figures would have been higher than 80 and 90%. But in the modern world, we can take 50%. So I mentioned Peter Marshall, and here's the prayer that he offered for every couple on the day they were married. "Dearly beloved, marriage is one of the most delightful as well as the most solemn of human relationships. It's much more than a bed of roses, much more than the whispers of vows of undying affection. It is the clasping of hands, the blending of lives, and the union of hearts, so that two people may walk together up the hill of life to meet the dawn. Together, discharging life's duties, sharing its joys and bearing its burdens. In our day and age, marriage is by many lightly regarded and by many lightly discarded. In the sight of God, however, marriage will forever remain the eternal union of hearts made possible by the gift of love which God alone can bestow." That's the way to make Ephesians chapter 5 work. It's a way to make Proverbs 18 come true. What we have seen in the 5 languages of love is a process of mutual submission, where husbands and wives learn to know what is good for the other and practice those, and in so doing, they become what we call the sunshine lover. Today is a beautiful sunny day. How do we feel on a beautiful sunny day like this? Great. So we can come lightly dressed like Ed is and Scott is and Emmanuel is. And then those of us who are always cold like me and Lydia, we wear jackets like it's windy. But if it's windy, that's what we do, isn't it? We cover up so we can stay warm. How you treat your spouse will come through like wind, and she or he will freeze in the context of a relationship. Or it will come through as sunshine, and she or he will free up, they will open up. And the goal, of course, is to be a sunshine husband. And then you have a much better more blessed experience as a spouse.